You want oil to live above 60 but below 90. And don't get me wrong, we're still printing money at 90, but gas gets up over $3.50 a gallon, it starts to pinch. It hits 100, every product in America has to readjust its price. $78 a barrel, that's about perfect. It brings enough profit to keep exploring, but it don't sting as much at the pump.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill, thanks for being here. That was Billy Bob Thornton you just heard from the hit show Landman, talking about the sweet spot for the price of oil. And that general idea, the sweet spot when it comes to money, is actually something that comes up a couple of times today in my conversation with Tyler Gardner. He's a former financial advisor and portfolio manager who hosts the very popular podcast, Your Money Guide on the Side. He also has a Substack called Social Recap. And this was a very fun conversation because we didn't really know each other, and I feel like we hit it off pretty quickly. He is also a fellow child of northern New England, so we talked about what money was like growing up, how he wanted to work on Wall Street and then changed his mind, and then changed it again. Tyler has had a very interesting career path. We also talked about a book that we both love and the lessons about money and business and entrepreneurship that we got from that book. So let's get into it with Tyler Gardner. You're in Vermont right now. Did you grow up in Vermont?
Yeah, born and raised. And it was one of the places from which I thought I would flee as soon as I had the opportunity to do so. I grew up in Killington, Vermont. My dad was a ski patrolman there. We moved to Norwich, Vermont, and that was where I spent probably, 8 or 9 years. Went away for high school, oddly came back to Vermont for college, and that was where I majored in economics for the first time, thinking that I wanted to go be an investment banker or a Wall Street analyst or something to do with money, but also majored in English and ended up being an English teacher and finally moved out of Vermont after college. And for about 10 to 15 years, thought I'd never be back here, and then met my wife, who was native from Norwich, Vermont. We had never known each other when we were here, yet had apparently grown up side by side within 4 years from one another. And then when we came back, went on a date, and now we're married. I've been married for 5 years, but now we're back in Vermont.
I want to come back to almost all of those topics, but let me go even earlier. And as soon as you said Killington, I thought, I'm assuming at least one of the parents worked in the ski industry.
You got it.
What is the earliest memory you have when it comes to money?
Oh my gosh. It's funny you bring up skiing because that's probably it. So my father was a ski patrolman at Killington. And because he could get us cheaper lift tickets as kids. I've got a couple older siblings. At the time, I had 2 older siblings, and the 3 of us would go. And I recall that he didn't want us ever to go skiing on a day when anybody was there, or anybody on a Saturday or a Sunday. He wanted us to go when we would get the best discount we could possibly get. Unfortunately, Chris, the times we could get the best discounts were Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m., back when they used to run first chairs as early as 7 or 7:30. And then when we'd break for lunch, he would pull out a bag of Cheerios and a block of cheese that he had brought from home as we were watching other kids go by with a hot chocolate or nachos or an overpriced hot dog. And that was probably the first time that I recall thinking about this thing called money and kind of how it impacted my father, and then in turn, how it kind of impacted our schedules and our lives and what we were willing to do to make sure that we could save a couple dollars as a family. That was probably the earliest time.
Was money discussed at home at all? Because your description of your father makes me wonder the extent to which he shared what money was like for him growing up.
Never. And I say this lovingly. He came from a generation and a family where the real tough conversations were not had. Feelings were not talked about. Money was not talked about. The things that were, very similar to how we say, let's not talk about politics at the dinner table. At the Gardner family table, money was never discussed, nor was alcohol. I mean, alcohol was never, and these were some of the topics that we just kind of slowly assumed were normal, never discussed. And so he didn't share much about it. It was more from observations growing up. And so I'm sure like a lot of people, we were kind of left on our own to figure out what was this thing that kept driving my father and mother to fight every now and then, and have some disagreements from time to time.
What was the first job you had as a kid?
Oh gosh, mowing lawns, probably. I'd have to think mowing lawns because it was probably also the first time that I had access then to my own money. Because I probably got a very light allowance. I don't know if allowance is even still a thing, but I recall when I was a kid, we would get 50 cents or $1 for X amount of chores. But if I mowed the lawn, I would get $5. And $5 for me growing up as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old was, I mean, that allowed me to go off to the store and buy candy or buy ice cream or treat a friend to candy or ice cream. So I also realized actually pretty quickly, this is a great question, that money was power. And I don't even just say that looking back at it now. I say that as like at the time, I'll even confess I stole money from my parents frequently because I had realized very quickly that it was something that I could then go get social capital with. And if I went to the store and I was the kid in my friend group who had $5 or $10, all of a sudden more people wanted to be around me. And so I could buy them, again, candy or ice cream or something. And at the time, I didn't realize it was obviously very cheap and superficial friendships, but I realized quickly this was a thing that held a lot of stature. And if you walked around with it and you paid for others, all of a sudden you got attention. So mowing the lawn was probably the first time where I really kind of understood if I get this thing, I can go exchange it. And I never wanted the thing itself. It wasn't even the food. It was actually the ability to have others see me spend the money. That stuck with me early.
Were you and your siblings encouraged to get jobs when you were younger? I mean, again, I'm going back to what you've shared so far about your dad. It seems like a work ethic and sort of earning your own keep, as it were, would be part of that.
I think we were all encouraged to do our fair share of chores. And I don't recall the jobs only because I went away to private school from 14 to 18. And I would think that's, as did my older sister. My older brother was the only one who stayed at home with my dad and mom during his high school years. So my guess is he was probably the only one exposed to whether or not he was supposed to get a job at that time. For us, up until 14, it had primarily just been basically pay for play. Like if you want to eat at this dinner table, that's fine. Here are the chores you're going to perform and we'll give you X amount of money. But I had never really been, as far as I remember, I had never really been encouraged to get a job before that. But we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, growing up, we really did not have a lot. That's why when I stole the grocery money one week, it was probably the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't realize the ramifications of doing this, but we were tight growing up, especially with multiple kids, growing up and trying to obviously feed the family.
How did they pay for private school then? Or was it a situation where they said, we're going to be tight about money in these other areas so that we can afford private school?
Financial aid. Financial aid was a savior. And it ended up, we've done the math since. And this is really interesting because my older brother, I have 3 siblings, so I have 1 younger sister. 3 of us went to private school in Massachusetts. And when we hear that, obviously we think, $50,000, $60,000 a year tuitions. And even at the time, it was egregious if you were paying full tuition. We didn't pay full because we were in what I believe now, looking back on it and reflecting on it, we were in kind of the money sweet spot of it was tight as a family, but because it was tight, you could tell schools that it was tight very fairly. And some of these schools had a lot of money to give people that they were going to offer financial aid to. So when we look back and do the math, it was actually cheaper, interestingly, for 4 years for us to go to these schools, because then we'd be fed there, we'd be housed there, and we wouldn't have any utilities at home that we were taking up from the parents. So we look back and laugh that going to private school was the cheaper option for us than actually staying home and going to public school.
Is it at private school when you're in high school? Is that when you start to get the idea about a career in investment banking? Because, unless I'm mishearing you, you went into the University of Vermont with the mindset of this is what I'm going to study, which tells me you had made that decision in high school.
I had made the decision, as far as academics go, I had made the decision that I loved math and I loved applying math. My mind was very quantitatively oriented and I wanted to apply it to real world situations. So I'd already gravitated towards economics. I loved the field of economics. I thought it was highly practical. I thought it was fun. It was useful. But the lesson...
Hold on. You thought economics was fun? I was on board for everything right up until you used the word fun.
I didn't know if you were going to pick on me for fun or useful. And I'm going, I didn't know if you're going to pick on the useful component and just say it was all theoretical. I thought it was fun. There was something about talking about the applications of money and how people thought about it that really intrigued me. It really did interest me, not just to do the numbers and solve the problems, but let's apply it to a real world situation. And the second I got into microeconomics and behavioral economics, that was fascinating to me. I mean, that's where it went from math to psychology and philosophy and sociology, and that made me want to study it forever. I mean, if you offered me the opportunity to still be a student today and just read about this stuff for the rest of my life, I would take you up on that in a heartbeat for no money, call it a day, if you just let me do that. I thought it was a blast. But they only offered 2 economics courses in high school, but what I learned there, and I'll just say, so I went to Andover, and at Andover, you are exposed to more lessons about money consciously and unconsciously than you would ever imagine because you are classmates with the ultra wealthy 1%, 0.0001%. So I even recall, my junior year going on a spring break trip down to Palm Beach, Florida. And for just a moment, I got a glimpse of that world. I got a glimpse of what it could buy. I got a glimpse of the restaurants that you could go to. I got a glimpse of the villas that you could stay at. None of this was paid for by me or my family. This was all a treat from another family. And it made me go, wait a minute, this isn't how I grew up. I don't know what any of this is. So what does this person's mother do? What does this person's father do to provide them with the opportunity to go to these places? And where did this type of wealth come from? So it just kind of started the disconnect with me of we grew up, again, in a very nice place and we were always well fed, everything was good. But I wanted to know, how do I potentially start to make money like this, and where would I go? And so obviously, the biggest stereotype is we just go into investment banking. So I thought, now I'm so glad I didn't, but that's kind of how I got intrigued by that is the disconnect between how I had seen the world pre-Andover and how I then saw the world during that kind of tenure of my life.
So you go to the University of Vermont, degree in economics, degree in English, both?
Both, yeah.
And after that, you go where?
So then I taught for 1 year. I taught English out in Wisconsin, of all places. I still recall I was at a senior party and I got a call from a school in Wisconsin. I'd put my resume on one of these job boards for teaching, and they offered me a job paying $22,000 for the year to go teach English and coach soccer. And for me, again, now we're just kind of incrementally moving here. And from my $5 to mow a lawn to, all of a sudden being offered $22,000, this was the equivalent of offering me $1 million today. I had never had disposable income before. I had never understood what it meant to be able to go pay for my own dinner at a restaurant. And so even that was so enticing that I went for a year and just said, let's go have an adventure. Quickly came back to studying English, oddly enough. My track switched pretty greatly there because I was teaching English for a year and then applied to get a master's in English and moved back to Washington, D.C. So from 24 to 26 was doing a master's there, and then went and taught private school English for another 7 years before getting that itch to come back into finance again. So it took me until probably 34 years old to pivot back into finance and back into money. I had spent almost my entire early professional career teaching literature.
When you make the decision to go to graduate school, you're committing not just your time, you're also committing financial resources, ideally with the thought of this is going to lead to a better job, a higher salary, that sort of thing. How much did that factor into the decision to get an advanced degree in English Lit?
It didn't, because the ROI for a master's in English Lit is little, to say the least. It
rounds to zero.
So it wasn't. It's interesting. I had no need for more money. I mean, I guess I'd say I'm thankful. I mean, even going back to the Killington chairlift and the cafeteria, I grew up being very appreciative of incredibly small, few and far between luxuries. And so just that 1 year in Wisconsin, plenty of money. I don't need more than that. And then graduate school, I was lucky enough to be admitted into a scholarship program where they paid for the grad school plus I think it was a $15,000 stipend. Now, to live in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, you need a little more than $15,000 a year.
Yes, you do.
So I did get a side job there, but the $15,000 again was enough to at least make me say, hey, like, I'm not going into debt for this. And that was something that I had kind of tried my best right out of college, because I went to my state school, and I tried my best out of college to say the one thing I want to try to avoid at all costs is the debt, because I know how crippling that can be. I know how it can be such a pattern for people and so impossible to get out of. So I just made it a rule that I was never going to partake in any education again unless it was paid for by a scholarship or by my employer. So Georgetown was paid for by a scholarship, and I was incredibly thankful. It was a phenomenal program, and I got to tutor during my time there. And then I got an M.Lit at Middlebury, and that the prep schools paid for. So if you teach at some of the New England prep schools, a lot of those schools will pay for you to go back and get yet another degree, so they can then put on their website that their faculty is, loaded with degrees. So it's a scratch back scenario. But hey, I'll take a $30,000 back scratch any day if I can get another degree on the resume and do it during the summers. So that was where the secondary, but it was never for ROI, for money. That never came into it.
So what pushes you back into the world of finance? Is it the students? You just got sick of the kids?
No, man, I loved it. I honestly, the students, and I think most teachers will say that the students were the best part. The teaching students, I will say even now, I miss dearly. I miss being in a classroom with students who are excited to be there. And it wasn't always like that. I'm not painting some idyllic picture of a classroom. It was hard. But what pushed me actually was there was a moment, I actually still remember this very vividly, is we had a representative from TIA CREF come to talk to the faculty about our retirement portfolios. And this representative was perfectly nice, but was unable to communicate and articulate how an expense ratio works, what a target date retirement fund is, why we only had access to X amount of funds and who was paying for those fund options. And this was a faculty, when they were kind of giving this presentation to a faculty of about 100 people who were pretty sharp faculty. And all of us walked out that day being more confused about our retirement funds than when we had walked in. I genuinely was like, there's a big problem here. Like, this is something that should be on the surface very straightforward and simple. And yet that just made this sound so complex, and it's not that complex. And so I got into, reading in my spare time. I was reading Andrew Tobias in my spare time. I was reading Burton Malkiel in my spare time. I was reading Susie Orman. I went through all of the kind of the canon of personal finance, thinking, who has explained this better than that TIA representative just did? And then I kind of became like the de facto person on the faculty who would talk to other faculty about their retirement funds and kind of help them understand, here's what your fees are, here's what the admin fees are, here's why you might want to be in a different fund based on your being 30 and aggressive versus 60 and a little more conservative. And I loved it. And so started idealizing potentially being a financial advisor. I thought that for some reason, being a financial advisor would equate to having all of these incredible teaching moments with people, and it would be just like a classroom, and you'd be, able to talk to people about fun ideas and philosophy and psychology. So that was kind of the impetus behind switching back after that. It wasn't that I didn't want to be with the students. It's that there was this kind of, I've done X for 10 years. Let me see about Y and see if this venue can lead to another skill set that would be fun to develop.
Quick question. Do you spend all day watching the stock market? Me neither. But at the end of the day, I still want to get caught up on what happened. So that's why I read Brew Markets. It is the daily post-market email from Morning Brew. It hits your inbox right after the closing bell and tells you not just what happened on Wall Street, but what you can actually do with that information. I love it because it cuts through all the noise with clear, timely insight on the biggest stories moving stocks, from AI to earnings to tariffs, international drama, and it's all written by people who know the markets, and it's free. Just go to brewmarkets.com/money to sign up. There's a lot of stock market coverage out there, and a lot of it is too late, too dry, or too shallow. Brew Markets is timely, genuinely useful, free, and it's written with Morning Brew's signature sense of humor, the kind that makes a dense market day easier to digest. So if you want a smarter wrap-up of the day in the markets, one that respects your time and sharpens your thinking, sign up for Brew Markets. It is a must-read and it's free. Just go to brewmarkets.com/money and sign up today. All right, let's get back to Tyler. How much did you and your wife talk about money before you got married?
Probably not nearly as much as we should have. I think we're very fortunate that that as we have come to, I would say, what are the most commonly anticipated money questions that come up with couples, we have been mostly, never always, but mostly on the same page. But man, we didn't talk about it at all. I think, in our time dating and in our time engaged, I think the only thing we decided together was that neither one of us prioritized money. We prioritized enough money for the feeling of security and stability, but neither one of us was going to risk spending fewer hours with the other person or with our dogs or at home to go chase an opportunity just so we could add another zero to the portfolio. That was one value that we actually agreed on very early in our time. So I guess the better answer to that question is probably we talked a lot about the things that money can buy. We talked as far as the values go, but we didn't ever really necessarily name that it was about money, that was the thing that we were focusing on.
Before we get to the speed round, I want to ask you about a particular book, because when I was doing a little bit of research and reading about you, I want to make sure I'm correct about this, but I came across a book that I think you and I might share an affinity for, and that is Shoe Dog.
Oh my
by Phil
gosh.
Knight.
You just pulled up my Bible.
Tell me what elevates this book for you, because it is a book that when I've had the occasion to speak about investing and business, whether it's to a professional organization or a college class, I will often mention this book, and I'm curious what it is that you love about. And for those unfamiliar, Shoe Dog is the book by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike.
Yeah. I know that people won't be able to see this, but I'll just say that behind me on the video right now, I have about 7 quotes, 5 of which are from Shoe Dog. And this was a book that I read, and then about 2 weeks later, I reread, and then about 3 months later, I reread. And not only is it incredible storytelling, I mean, this is really just a captivating page turner. But when it comes to how Phil Knight got into this obsession with the shoes and what it is that, to me, I hear him say separates people who are ultimately really successful and fulfilled versus those who just aren't quite there yet. A couple of my takeaways were one, he started the book. I don't know if you recall, the very first few pages, he reflects on growing up in Oregon. And he said that one of his teachers would always repeat the tale of the Oregon Trail to him, and said that what the teacher wanted the students to remember is that the cowards never started, the weak died along the way. That leaves us, the people from Oregon. And that I have applied that to more scenarios in life, and even just to make a very quick, very clear connection to investing. There are people who will sit here and say, there's no way I could ever accumulate $500,000 in a lifetime, but they'll never start. They won't invest that first dollar. Then there are people who will invest that first 100 and for some reason feel like they did it, that was it, and never return to it and wonder why in 5 years that 100 isn't worth $500,000. And then there are people who consistently, day in, day out, add a brick to the wall, invest $10 a week, $50 a month, whatever they can. And all of a sudden you look up and you go, wow, I didn't really realize this could actually turn into something, and that's what had happened to my 401k through 8 years of teaching at prep schools, is that I was doing my best to add as much as I could each year. And I remember after the 8th year, just looking up and saying, I made it. I made it to Phil Knight's version of Oregon. There you go. I wasn't a coward. I just kept putting it in, and I wasn't weak in stopping, and I did it. And so everything that he kind of builds on from that point forward, the ultimate root of that book to me is just consistency. Above all else, you have to have this unwavering consistency of a vision and just say, look, this is the thing I want to do. But if I want to do it, I've got to work every single day to get to that point, and ultimately I will. I mean, that's my first big takeaway. I don't know if that was one of your also equal good moments in the book for you.
No, I agree with everything you said. And right at the top, you talked about how well written it is. And this is a book that when it first came out, I worked with people who read it and they said, you should read this book. I think you'd like this book. And I just sort of politely nodded and then brushed it off because I thought, well, this is like this. I thought this is going to be one of those books like we see all too often, which is successful business person at the end of their career writes sort of their version of how they all made it happen. And maybe 6 or 7 years after the book came out, I think I mentioned on a Motley Fool podcast that I had not read it. And a listener sent me the book and said, I can't believe you haven't read this book. You have to read this.
I got to start telling people I haven't read books more often.
And to your point about how well written it is an incredibly compelling book to the point where at a couple of different points, and again, it's Nike. It's the guy who founded Nike. He's writing about Nike. We all know what Nike is today, but the book is so well written, and the challenges that he faces for years of building this company, they were so great that at a couple of points during the book, I thought to myself, I don't think they're going to make it. I think this company is going bankrupt. I think they're going out of business. And for everything you said about work ethic and what it takes for, and particularly for college students, for anyone who thinks, I want to start a business, read Shoe Dog. Yeah. And if you want to know what it takes to start a business and have it succeed, I think it's as good a book as any I've encountered.
And that's it, because even going back to your first point here is it's easy for us to say, obviously, that whether we call it history is written by the victors or that all of these books are written by, the people at Microsoft and Amazon, and of course they're successful. But just to expand on exactly what you said of these moments, at no point basically in the book, other than in the conclusion, I believe, does Knight really reflect on how much money he currently has and how successful he is. The entire book is just about how he failed. He failed over and over and over again and got sued and went bankrupt and had to get more money. And so there's no point in the book where you feel like this is going to be the Nike that we know today. And so the entire book, to me, actually isn't about success in a way. I'll even come back on my own words. It's really about loving failure and loving that you're going to have to fail so many times. But going back to what you and I had talked about pre-show, is just the importance of launching, though, too. That's one thing that I take from this, is that at no point, when Phil Knight had an idea, at no point did he sit there and say, well, I've got this great idea, but let me come up with 10 reasons why it probably wouldn't work in the real world. He said, well, there's one way to see if it will work in the real world. Try it. And he tried it. And so I'm becoming more attached to this idea, too, of the waste of time that so many of us have sitting in, you call it a boardroom, a classroom, anywhere, and just talking about what might work, what might not work. Just go try it. Just throw things. And so, yeah, if I were talking to any group of high school, college, or young professionals, it would be, don't waste your time thinking whether something will work. Just go try if it will work. And you'll find out very quickly if it will work or not. It won't take long for the market to tell you if you have a viable option or not. But I'm obsessed with it. It's right behind me. And I'm so glad you brought that book up.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing you have bought that makes you happy?
I'm going to say something that is sacrilege to personal finance, but about a decade ago, I splurged and bought a Sierra Denali truck. And I bought it brand new, and it was probably the biggest depreciating asset I have ever bought in my life. It was egregiously expensive. And anyone who tells you that money can't buy happiness has not driven a Denali, because every time I got in that truck, I was in a better mood. I don't care. It was beautiful, and it cost way too much money.
Do you still have it?
No, and my parting day with it was one of the saddest days of my life. I made that kind of trade in where you're kind of trading in the motorcycle for the minivan component. And it wasn't a family issue. It was more of just, maybe we should save a couple more dollars than this and put away a couple more dollars. So I got a less expensive option, and within one day of driving, immediately regretted it and have been hoping to get back in the Denali ever since.
Well, this may be the answer to my next question, which is, have you ever made a purchase in your adult life that you regret and you still think about it?
Ooh. What are we talking price point here? Just any price point?
Any price point. I don't know about you, but I've bought things for $5 that I regret.
Oh, I mean, tons of things. I would say, mostly, obviously, the cars that I did not like, I've regretted. Luckily, I've started to lease cars. Again, I know that's personal finance sacrilege, but I've leased cars just because I know how picky I am with some of them. As far as buying, I think you've just exposed the fact that I might be a complete hoarder when it comes to money, and I can't immediately think of something that I bought that I just said, gosh, I really regret this purchase. And I wish I could send it back, because mostly I do now. And in this era, I can. I wish I had a better answer to that question.
We'll move on then. What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself, not for your wife or anybody else, just for you? Again, given your confession about hoarding money, maybe there's not an answer to this one.
Oh no, I've splurged just for me. Last thing was it was called a Southwestern Experience Sweat Lodge in Sedona, Arizona. It was a $400 sweat lodge experience / massage that I said, you know what? I'm going to give this a go, because I have never really treated myself to anything like this in the self-care realm. And again, very expensive. It's a car payment, but I said, I'm going to just go and try it. And that actually can answer your last question. I regretted spending money on that. I realized right as I'm saying that, I go, and I regretted every second of it. I walked out, I said, that was fine, but immediately I'm going, why would I spend $400 on that? That wasn't worth it. I'm not in a better state right now than I was 2 hours ago.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
Compound interest. The most boring answer you'll ever get, but it's the truest thing. If you could have told me about compound interest from when I was 15 years old and had me actually understand what that meant by just putting $10 here, $20 there into any type of account, compound interest. And still to this day, I talk to 50 and 60-year-olds who still don't even want to invest at 50 because they say it's too late, and they just waste a decade of compound interest even just to get to 60. Without a doubt, that's the number one thing about money I wish I knew earlier.
What's a charitable cause you like to support?
Summer camps. That's one I do support. I'm on a local board for a summer camp, and if they asked me in the right way, I would probably give them 99% of my annual revenue right now, because it brings. I grew up at a summer camp in Vermont, and it was the one place where I felt that kids who weren't necessarily always labeled as cool kids during the typical academic or athletic years could really shine. It was the one type of environment where you would let kids shine who hadn't quite figured out how to get involved with the other cool kids at the other lacrosse tables and hockey tables growing up. So now it is with so much, I have more joy giving money away. And I'd always heard this. I mean, as a teacher, I didn't have money to give away. And now that I do, and I had always heard that it brings you a ton of joy to actually just give, I can't echo that enough. When I make a donation and help that camp, it brings me so much joy in life to just say, I know where it's going. I know that it's going to help some other kid find their way. This is perfect.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Recently, Landman. If someone hasn't seen Landman, I would say that is one of the best TV shows I've seen in the last decade. Billy Bob Thornton plays the character that he has been meant to play since he was born, most likely just himself. But it is phenomenal writing, start to finish. It was sharp and entertaining and inspiring. And the music, the cinematography, it made me want to move to Texas. Then I went and visited Texas and wanted to move back to Vermont. So
the last thing is a penny for your thoughts. This is just any kind of life wisdom that you've picked up along the way that you want to share with people who are listening. It doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything.
Sure. I think that one's easier than the what I spend money on that I regret question, because this is one that I've just been thinking about endlessly, and it does have to do with money and it doesn't. And the point is, it is so easy for all of us. And I'll even go back to just talking to the potential student who's in college right now, majoring in economics, wanting to be an investment banker, or the young professional who wants to be a vice president or a president of a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman Sachs. You have to start with backwards induction with life, as far as you have to first decide, what is it that you actually want money to buy? You have to start there. None of us do. None of us. We always just start with, we want more money. That's how we're born. We're raised. We're brought into this world where more money just is better. It just means we've got more status. Something's better. But so few of us have sat down and said, but what do I actually want to do with these dollars once I accumulate them? And for me, the reason I now dole that out as this kind of sanctimonious, righteous wisdom for anyone who is willing to listen is that when I actually sat down and wrote out what it is that makes me happy on a daily basis, that costs about $60,000 a year. So I can do almost whatever the heck I want professionally, right? And still be able to afford that lifestyle. Whereas the second that I start pushing for that 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 job that takes away any more of my hours away from the thing that I wanted to do, now moving over to this thing that I don't want to do, to me, that's a waste. And yet so many of us, especially people in 20s and 30s, who are really getting into some of these corporate ladder jobs, can just be blinded to an extent and waste so much time accumulating cash that they say, I don't even know what I wanted to spend this on in the first place. And that's not a problem that you just solve the moment you retire. It's not a problem that you just solve the moment you have $2 million. So I would say that the quicker and sooner someone can say, this is what I want money to do for me, the more clearly you can address that with a job that will work for you and the pay scale that will work for you.
There you go. If you want more money insights from Tyler Gardner, check out his podcast, Your Money Guide on the Side, wherever you get your podcasts. And check out his weekly newsletter, Social Recap. I've got links to both of them in the episode description. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.